Steve Dangle again, Rory Boylen. We just made a video about stuff, and now there's more stuff. We actually have a trade to announce. Sergei Bobrovsky has been traded for a second and 2/4. Does that feel like fair value?
It sounds like totally unfair value to me, actually.
Well, 7 years ago, that's what the Philadelphia Flyers got in return from the Columbus Blue Jackets.
And you wonder why they haven't had a goalie in decades?
Well, it's
Until
okay.
now.
It's okay. The Flyers actually used one of those picks to draft Anthony Stolarz.
Oh, good. Oh, okay.
Who they used to get Cam Talbot,
Yep.
who is now with the Flames.
There you go. Okay.
Wow, was that a bad deal? And now all of a sudden, Sergei Bobrovsky is the second highest paid goalie in the NHL and just made $70 million. What do you think there, Panthers fan?
Well, I mean, this had to happen for the Florida Panthers, didn't it? What was plan B if they struck out on Sergei Bobrovsky?
Right.
Chris Driedger, I don't think is your number 2 option. Sam Montembeault, don't think is your fallback option there. I kind of assumed that Reimer was going to be the guy traded or bought out, and that ended up happening. But I also thought that Luongo was going to stick around for another season, and that would be a really good combo. The fact that both of those guys are gone made it like they had to get Bobrovsky, because you look at the Florida Panthers, I think if you look back at their last season, you can forget they had the second best power play in the NHL.
They were automatic.
Yes. They were the 9th best offense in the league. There's no question their forwards are really good. They got 3 young prospects in Denisenko, Heponiemi, and Owen Tippett pushing. They're going to be factors in that lineup before long, too, and they're going to be on cheap deals. There's some work to do on the back end, but getting a goalie at Sergei Bobrovsky's level who could be a Vezina candidate at any year, there's a risk in signing a guy in his 30s for long term for a $10 million AAV at the goaltending position. But I think it's one that the Panthers absolutely had to take a swing on, because they have playoffs in mind next year.
Ironically, when I was doing ice surfing episodes last year, my favorite games to watch were the Panthers playing the Flyers.
Yes.
Because they were all 7-6.
Yes.
And they were absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the team you just described to me, they got a lot of talent up front.
Yes.
Their defense needs work.
Yes.
Now that they have goaltending, they should probably be counting on making the playoffs in the Atlantic Division. You just described the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
So do you think, because I thought that as well, watching the Florida Panthers play, I go, what's the problem here? Oh, they can't stop a beach ball.
Yeah.
You think they're going to make the playoffs this upcoming season?
I want to see how everything shakes out, but I feel really good about this right now. Absolutely, I do. I thought last year they could have made a push, and I really think that if they got better goaltending than what they got, they would have been in that playoff race to the bitter end. Like, they had the second worst save percentage in the league to the San Jose Sharks last year. It was really bad. Even league average goaltending last year has them in discussion for the playoffs. So getting, again, Bobrovsky, you could win the Vezina Trophy.
Could.
I mean, you might be talking about maybe they can push for home ice advantage in the first round, even get into that second spot. That might be a bit of a reach, but there's still a lot of young players on there that are still going to take steps forward. There are still moves to be made. I don't think they're done. Dale Town has made it clear that he's willing to spend. The owner, Vinny Viola, has made it clear he wants to spend and get this team into the playoffs. They have to upgrade that defense. I think that's coming next.
So, okay, they need to obviously spend some of that money that they have, or they're ready to spend that money, and they're not done making moves. One of the guys I heard who could be heading out of town is Mike Hoffman. Do you think that makes sense at this point?
If they had signed Artemi Panarin, I think it would have made a lot of sense to move out Mike Hoffman. He's a year away from unrestricted free agency. He spent a lot of time on their third line last year, but he scored a pile of goals, right? That's all he does. But that's a very valuable asset. He's got problems on his defensive side, whatever. He'll score you probably around 30 goals a season. That's very valuable. I think if you can move him for a puck-moving defenseman to put on that back end, I think that's something you still got to explore, especially if that defenseman has a little bit more term on his deal. Because you're probably looking at next summer at the possibility of losing Mike Hoffman for nothing. So if you can find a way to move him, again, with all the prospects that are coming up that makes it tenable to possibly move on from him right now, if the deal makes sense where you can get a guy for maybe 3 years, 2 years term, and you can move out Mike Hoffman for a top 4 defenseman, I think they gotta at least explore that.
So knowing that that is their need, I've heard whispers anyway of Aaron Ekblad potentially being on the chopping block. Does that make any sense to you?
I would not do that. No. I mean, $7.5 million long term is a pretty good contract for a number one defenseman.
It gets better every July 1st.
2 years from now, the US TV deal is up, and that's going to be signed. At that point, I think you're going to expect the cap to climb. So that $7.5 million for Ekblad is going to look like even more of a deal at that point. You can count on him for minutes. He can play penalty kill and power play. There's not a lot of guys that can do what Aaron Ekblad can do. So again, you'd have to look at that trade and see, okay, maybe that makes sense, but just why would you shop a guy as young as Aaron Ekblad? He's still in his early 20s because he jumped into the league at 18.
I know, even though he looks 35.
Exactly. Yeah, you can forget he's still very, very young and still growing into the NHL defenseman I think he'll become. But right now, he's a top pair defenseman in the league.
Absolutely. I interviewed him when he was 15 years old, and I was already looking up at him. I was just like, this is unfair. This is unbelievable. So the Bobrovsky to Florida thing seemed like it was going to happen for a very long time. Yeah. Florida sort of put all their eggs in one basket. But that was still a maybe.
Yep.
They thought they were getting him, but it was a maybe.
Yep.
So now that they've gotten him, does the Spencer Knight pick in the first round still make sense to you?
Well, when that pick was made, I had mixed emotions about it because on the one hand, don't pick goalies in the first round, right? They're so volatile. I mean, one injury to a knee or a hip or anything like that can throw everything off, right? And just the way goalies develop is a little bit risky. But Spencer Knight is one of those special products. Sam Cosentino, I was talking to him, he puts him on that pedestal with an Andrei Vasilevsky potential-wise. He could get there. And if he hits, it's going to look great. I think they made that pick knowing that they had a really good shot to get Sergei Bobrovsky. That had to be in their mind, right? And you can look at this down the road. First thing it does is it makes it not a rush to get Spencer Knight to the NHL, which is a plus. You don't want to rush a goalie into the league. And when he gets here, Sergei Bobrovsky is still going to be here. You don't want to lean on your starting goalie for 60 games anymore. You need tandems. And if Spencer Knight can break into the NHL, and not that they're going to split at 41-41 when he first gets here, but if you can break in and he can kind of spell Sergei Bobrovsky for some time, lighten his workload, and kind of ease his own way, Spencer Knight, into the league that way, I think that's going to help his development too. And by the time he gets into the NHL year 2, year 3, and Bobrovsky's still there, that could be a really dangerous, really top-notch goaltending duo, which can take teams a long way these days.
Speaking of really dangerous, and we were already talking about the defense, Rory, listen, my head's spinning. I can't keep up with what's going on today or even what we've talked about already. Have we talked about Anton Stralman?
We have not talked about Anton Stralman
because it sounds like he's going to the Panthers and he's exactly what ails them.
Yes, exactly.
He cures what ails them.
Yeah, cures what ails them. He's a defensive defenseman, specializes in that. I mean, there's injury concerns. He was limited to just over 40 games this year. But again, it's not a long term or anything like that. You can work your way around it. He kind of just steadies things. Like with Keith Yandel, you have a guy that's going to take some risks on offense. You want some stability, I think, on the defensive end, and maybe those two become a pair. Maybe he's on a pair with Aaron Ekblad even, because he played a ton of minutes with the Tampa Bay Lightning in a defensive role. I think that's going to help their penalty kill, help their 5-on-5 defensive situations. A nice little pickup again for the Florida Panthers. Exactly what they need to upgrade on this summer.
All right, Stralman, Norris, Bobrovsky, Vezina, and Panthers Cup. You heard it from Rory Boylen first. That is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. And then they need to what?
Win the Stanley Cup.
Tell all their friends. Rory! God!